Hello, everybody, and we are back for another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. As you know, I told you before in the first one, this is our second one of the day, so hopefully you guys joined in on the first one and tuning in on this one right here. And as always, we got another great guest for you guys. And as always, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head over to their YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And as always, I am just happy that you guys are tuning in. Before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. And do me a favor, if you know anyone that can benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this along with them. And as I bring on my guest, help me welcome her. But if you guys have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section. We'll be sure to get to those as we go along. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring on my next guest. Help me welcome Katie Huey.
How you doing? I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I have to say that is the most epic countdown for a podcast that I've seen. So I'm feeling very energized.
Ooh, I love it. I can feel the energy through the computer. I'm ready. So before we get started, who you are, where you from, and about the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 big questions. My name is Katie Huey. I base out of Northern Colorado. And I wear a lot of different hats, but my grief hat is very much centered around creating spaces where people find words for difficult experiences. So, and this is going to overlap into your next question a little bit too, but when I lost my dad, a lot of people would say to me, there are no words, and I am a writer. And so that really became a pet peeve for me. I feel like I have a lot of words and a lot of things to say, and our culture is just really not equipped to receive or hear or sit with those words. So that's put me on a journey to help people find their words for disruptive life experiences. And that looks like a lot of things, whether that's facilitation or creation of workshops. I have a blog that I do, and then I'm also a coach for people who are in transition, integrating grief experiences or difficult experiences into their lives as they want to move forward.
Nice. Now that my question would be, because you're absolutely right about putting labels to the grief experience that we have, right? And that's something that I'm a huge advocate for, because we often look at the 5 pillars of grief, or like as they like to state it, the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah.
Tell people anger can take on many different faces. You just have to have a label to put on to authenticate what you're actually feeling. And one of the things I came up with was the word flabbergasted. I was like, you know what? I am really flabbergasted at this in this moment. And somebody started laughing. I looked at her and said, no, it's true. I'm angry, but it's something different.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about the adding labels to what we're feeling, what are some of the labels that you've helped people understand aside from the basic one?
When you say the basic one, you mean like the big 5, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? It's interesting. I guess I pushed back on that title label a little bit, but I think I was doing some work in a coaching program where they're talking about emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And one of the coaches that was teaching us was saying that most Americans are only equipped to recognize 5 emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Happy, sad, glad, angry, and maybe frustrated. And I was thinking, so again, like if you pair those to the 5 stages, there's some interesting connections there. But I was thinking, so how do we help people get self-aware enough to tune in to the wide variety of emotions that we experience?
Right.
There's a big gap in like our cultural discourse, the way we talk about our own emotions, what we're allowed to feel, what we're not allowed to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a lot of the coaching work that I do, I encourage people to start with just one word. And it might not even be a label of an emotion, but it's like, if you were to explain your grief in this moment right now, it would be like what? And you can use one word. And there's so much power. People might talk about an emotion. They might use a metaphor. They might say heavy. They might say a rock. I have another friend. She has a company called Snapshots of Life After Loss. And on social media, she regularly asks, what 3 words describe your grief today? And so there's just these practices that we can start to use where it's like, it is overwhelming. I think flabbergasted is a really powerful word. And with more time, the grief grows or shrinks depending on our situations. But those are two things that I return to on a regular basis of like, okay, let's tune in. What is one word? My grief to me today is like what? And it's an invitation for people first to own it, and then to start to create a character around it or some sort of container that makes it more palatable to hold.
Nice. My question would be, what led you down that particular path of understanding, how to identify your grief, right? and the reason why I asked that is because a lot of people do get stuck.
Yeah.
They, like you said, there's a huge gap in it, and not too many people make that connection that there's more to it than just these basic primal words that we use.
So what's the question? What led me down this path?
Yeah, what led you down that path to really help others identify that? I mean, because you had to put in the work yourself, right? And
oh yeah.
A writer, you had to be creative in how you thought about what you were feeling and being very authentic in it.
Yeah, that's a really powerful question. So I lost my dad in 2016. So it's been almost 8.5 years. Mm-hmm. And I share that time-bound nature, not to say like, look at me and how far I've grown, but rather it takes a really long time for individuals to figure out what their stories mean. And I can just say that in my own personal life, mm-hmm. It's been a long road for me to understand why this is important to me. But I think in those early days, there's a lot of support and people show up and will sit with you. And the further out you get, the more that support tends to fall off. In 2016, I also lost my job. And so I spent about a year trying to figure out where can I first help my family and the people that I love who also lost my dad thrive, or not even thrive, survive. And then what are some tools or coping mechanisms that can help me get more grounded? And I had started a blog actually back in 2014 that I call 52 Beautiful Things. And that was the year that my grandfather had died. And I had just gotten engaged and was trying to make sense of kind of that coming of age transition. Mm-hmm. And I was really looking for grounding good things in the world, So again, a lot has changed in 8 years. And we went through a pandemic and a contentious presidency and many different economic situations. But the through line for me, early days, and that I still stick with, is this idea of finding comfort. And comfort for me was writing. And so I would turn to my blog and look for good things that the world had to offer as a way of reminding myself, like, it's not as bad as it feels. Like the sky is not falling, but it became a ritual and a practice to search for good things, like ordinary things that we take for granted. So again, like I used to be a very avid journaler, and I would fill up notebooks. And when my dad died, that stopped. There was something very tangible about like putting pen to paper that felt too vulnerable. But the ironic thing is, like, I could type and publish my grief online for people to consume. But that felt cathartic and that felt very safe. I don't know. So a lot of my grief journey has been published on my blog, but it's in pursuit of looking for good things, even when you're hurting. And so through that practice, I really started to realize that there's this dichotomy that exists within humanity of like, I think there's a quote, it's like, everything is terrible and it's so beautiful.
I love that.
And I'm paraphrasing there, and I don't remember who that's attributed to, but that has become kind of a steady drumbeat of like, yeah, there's a lot to this world and this human experience. And when we can say, I am not alone in this, and look, there's some things that I can lift my chin towards, that helped me both have hope and connection with other people. Another thing that really helped me was the Dinner Party, which is an organization that serves people 20 to 40 who have lost someone. Are you familiar with that group?
No, no, I'm not. I'm not.
So they're a national organization, and they do. The idea was you would sign up for a table, and you would come together and have a collective meal and do story sharing around your loss. And so I found some community of like-minded peers who had also lost parents, and that really put me on a trajectory of the power of storytelling and creating Me Too moments. And that took the loneliness out of it for me and normalized a lot of what I was going through. So that's a long answer and a lot of different snippets of some things that have helped me. But in terms of this idea of getting stuck, I remember too, someone told me early on, like, oh, Katie, this is going to impact you for the rest of your life. And that totally pissed me off. And I think I've come to realize like they were 100% right. But I've allowed myself to let that soften rather than scare me. And so I think there's some going back to like emotions and labeling. It's like, how can this be true and not scary or overpowering?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. Ms. Liz, thank you for tuning in. She put a comment up here, and I think I want to ask this question to the audience today as well. What does your grief look like today? I love this answer right here. She said marble, right? Like, wow. When you think about grief and putting a word to it, right? I love the fact that she put up marble. Thank you for that, Miss Liz. If you guys haven't already, go check out her podcast as well. She's freaking amazing out there doing amazing things. I was on there. You guys have fun. But what do you think about that word? Marble.
What do I think?
Yeah.
I imagine those toys, the little ones that have the swirls in them. My dad had this jar of marbles on his desk, and we were allowed to play with them when we had to sit and wait at his office. So it evokes some memories, but also there's like the ones that I'm thinking of have little swirls in them. They're small. You can put them in a pocket. They also have big impact. But I'm curious, I don't know if Miss Liz is willing to share too, there's so many different ways to interpret that word. And I would push it one step further and say, okay, Liz, like a marble to you is like what?
I love that. If she's still tuning in, I would like to get your thoughts on that, Miss Liz. But I want to give a thought on that as well, because once you put it up there, my mind automatically went to the Greek statues.
Oh, very different. See,
very, very different. Very
yes.
different mindset, right? And I love the fact that like there's so many different facets that go along with that. Why did it take me there? Because when you see those statues that have been perfectly sculpted, right, and the detail, and the just everything, all the time that it goes in there, it's fragile but yet strong, right? And it shows everything that has been put into it: the love, the sadness, the anger, all of those things are captured inside of that marble. Now, as you said, the swirls, right?
Yeah.
Every marble is different. They going to have different things in there. Some of them got the little flowers inside of there. They got the little swirl. I see, when I was a kid, we used to play marbles, right?
Yeah.
And it's not easily chipped. It's designed to hit the next one to move it, right?
Oh, there's something powerful there.
That's when she put that up there, I was like, oh man, that is so deep right there, so yeah, already see what you're doing. You're already getting the creative juices going right there, right? And being a writer, but also being a vlogger, does it help as you begin to grow within your grief, to be able to, because most people would look at vlogging or writing as a place of severe deep vulnerability, and
Sure.
most people aren't afraid to be so open in that aspect, but you did it kind of early on in your journey.
Yeah, well, and I offer the invitation too. Not everything has to be shared. And actually, I think I offer caution. Brene Brown often uses the quote, people need to earn your story. And so,
Mhm.
as you're thinking about sharing your experience, just be cautious of who you're sharing that work with. Um, I think it can be vulnerable. And I think for me, it can be cathartic. A lot of times, too, you can write things, you can burn it up, you can crumple it up, you can keep it in a journal, you can publish it or delete it. Or, there's a lot of interaction that I invite with like the actual processed words. Um, so not all of it has to be out there for public consumption for it to be worthy. I think that's really important to remember.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Liz she just put another comment up here. I'm gonna pop this up here real
Like
quick.
emotions wrapped in glass.
This
Yeah.
is wrapped in glass. How deep is that, right? Because when we think about glass, and your emotions are wrapped into it, there's a sense of fragility that comes along with that. But there's a sense of transparency that comes along with that as well.
Yeah.
It makes me go, is the glass colored? Is it clear? Because it goes back to something that I learned a long time ago. It's easy to look within a glass house. It's harder to be in a glass house and look out,
Mm,
right? Because when you're looking inward, you see everything that's entailed inside of that glass house. But when you're inside of there, you don't really pay attention to it, but you're open to what everyone else can see. Hmm.
so what's the parallel then for you in your grief experience? The glass house.
Freedom.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that, see, I may look at grief just a little bit different from most people. It's the freedom of that expression of love, the love that was taken away, but also the love that was gained, right? And I'm transparent with it. See, within my grief, I fell in love with it.
Mm,
And everything that beautiful mess. So when people look on it out there on the outside looking in, they see the person that I am authentically who I am. I have nothing to hide from anyone. And I'm truthful about it when I say I fell in love with the beautiful mess that grief was. I love untangling it, right? I love the way that it push you in each and every direction, but no direction at all.
mm.
I love the way the blueprint consistently moves, right? And how I can take something and I can take it away, but I can also add in. You know, I can take away the things that no longer serve me and add in those things that I can use to serve others.
Yeah. Super
So that,
powerful.
when I think about those things, that's the thought that come to my mind. So I pose the same question to you.
The glass house
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Or maybe you got a
Yeah.
different analogy.
Well, no, I mean, I think I have a lot of analogies for it, but what I can resonate with and how you're sharing, um, is I too like to talk about it. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. But I think there is a common misconception, and a lot of people are really afraid of grief. They're afraid of losing people. They're afraid of talking about it. They're afraid of bringing up old stuff for others. And so for me, it's actually really easy to be inside the house trying to like project outside,
Mhm.
because I live here all the time. It's like it's part of my being. It doesn't necessarily go away. But I think from the outside, a lot of people are really afraid of how to approach. And they're really afraid of how to open the door or climb through the window. And like, are we really fragile, these beings who have gone through loss? And so what I love about what you're sharing about the messiness is actually that I think those are the spaces where humans can authentically connect, but there's so much that gets in the way of how we approach one another, how we view each other. And like the thing about glass too, is it can distort what you see. It's not always a clear pane depending on your angles, right? So yeah, we could play with this for a long time, but I love that messy invitation. Because I think people are really afraid of approaching it. And from the outside, it looks like one thing and it's very different from the inside. And each of us are going to have a different interpretation. One of the times that I first was starting to do some grief workshops, I used the phrase in the description, like, we'll be using wordplay to talk about our grief. And one of the pieces of feedback that I got was like, how dare you talk about playing with grief? Like, grief is painful. It's personal. I don't want to be playing with my grief. And it was the first time. I was very thankful for the feedback, but it also caught me off guard because I guess I take it with more levity. I try to hold it with more care. But for this person, it felt very dangerous to be playing with their grief. So it was a good aha moment for me that we all have very different definitions in how we approach and walk into these rooms and talk about our stories.
And I think a lot of times, like you said, it could be miscommunicated. And I get that as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's learning how to pivot when people say things like that. Like, no, you don't understand. I want to respect you in your grief journey, right? So it has nothing to do with me. I'm just here in your world. And, if you allow me to visit, you would understand that this is yours. I want to make sure that you understand that the power of how you move with your grief and how you interpret it is always going to be yours, and allow them the freedom to look at the things that they say, not take it back. I don't take those things personally, right? But it is an aha moment, but that's the reason why we learn to pivot.
Yep.
And having, like I said, the importance of having these conversations and things like that. We learn from different people, the different avenues that we can go down when we are in those individual spaces with people going through that transition.
Absolutely.
So, get your thoughts on that for a bit.
The ability to pivot?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's essential. I think where we as friends and colleagues and coworkers go wrong is we assume that we know. And we assume that what worked for me will work for them. And we assume that policies are sufficient. And there's a compassion researcher, her name is Monica Warling, and she often says that compassion requires customization. And that line sticks with me all the time as I think about, what works for me is going to be very different than what works for Tony. And so do we have enough space and curiosity to sit with someone authentically and enough trust to say, I'm sorry, that was not my intent. I messed up. How can we co-create together in service of what you need? So, pivoting is interesting. Like, I always get this like basketball kind of mentality of like, okay, I'm going to be moving this direction and then that direction. And sometimes it's quick, but I also think we can really just adjust course. And that's probably what you're intuiting for pivoting as well. But for me, it's a little bit more gentle. And sometimes we need those really abrupt, like, nope, we were going straight and now we really need to go left. Especially in times of crisis, in times of really traumatic events, care can require those drastic changes.
That's very true. Let me just rephrase what I said, because I don't want people to think that what I mean by pivoting is meaning I want to know how to show up.
Yes, exactly.
In other people's spaces, right? So that's what I mean by pivoting, because you said, the important thing that to remember is that everybody's going to do grief their own way, right? So when they call for services, right, I never know who or how they're experiencing their grief. So I have to come in totally empty, willing to accept what they are um, at that moment, because
Yes.
grief is a moment to moment thing, right? And so if I show up, say for instance, if I show up to Katie and Katie's not doing too well, she's looking to turn somebody's head off. So I understand that. So my goal is to come in and go, wow, I know, I see, like, I'm gonna give you what you need. So if I'm the soundboard that you need, I'm willing to be that. And so that's what I mean by pivoting. So in the next moment, you may be calm, cool, and collective. Well, I know that what we just went through right here, it's not personal. So when you go into that next moment, I want to make sure that I'm still an effective visitor with you,
Yep.
right? Um, because for one, it has nothing to do with me. I want to make sure that you have what you need in order to keep going through those moments without feeling judged or feeling invalidated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I mean by the pivoting thing, and learning these different areas, these different avenues to be able to show up and everything is crucial, right? Um, it's crucial in anybody's journey in grief. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, that I wasn't putting off the wrong interpretation when I said pivoting, and things like that, because it can be taken out of context, right?
Sure, of course.
But there's so much more to it and things like that. And so you've written books before, right? On these different things, and you do all kinds of workshops, etc. Moving forward. What made you? When did you first write your first book, and what was the premise behind it?
So I have not yet published a book. I am in process of turning my blog into a book, and I'm
Okay.
hoping that that comes to fruition in 2025 is my goal. But so that's always been a dream of mine. And I've been asking this question, like, am I a grief writer? Am I a writer with a grief story? And I think I'm the latter. So I've been working on that. But I do lead writing workshops, and I create workshops to help people find words for their experiences. And so some of them are centered around compassion. Some of them are centered around finding more joy. But there's the common theme of how do we put words to our human experiences, especially those that people don't want to look at or like would prefer to look at a little bit tangentially. There's a writer who talks about like it's easier to look at trauma kind of sideways. And I thought that was really interesting, going back to this glass house mentality, So there's a book in progress, but I don't have a published book yet. So stay tuned.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I want to talk about your work as being a transition coach as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the deciding factor? And explain to the audience what a transition coach is.
Yeah. So a lot of times when you think about coaching, there's a lot of conceptions around what is this and who gets to have access to it. A lot of people might have heard of life coaches. A lot of people might have heard of executive coaches. So I also am a leadership coach for another company that I work for. But what I have come to through a through line is life is a series of transitions. And some of them are more difficult than others, but many of them move us from here to there. And it's in this space where we have to navigate discomfort, letting go of things in order to move towards grabbing new things. So I like to say that I partner with people in this space as they're figuring out what are they wanting to let go of and what are they hoping to move towards. So sometimes that can be as a result of a grief experience. Maybe people know that they're sensing there needs to be a shift or a change. I also love partnering with women who are new moms and trying to figure out what does this mean for me in my new identity as a mother? What am I letting go of in service of having this new tiny human that I have to care for? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's in a career setting or an organizational setting where organizations are going through shifts and changes. Maybe you're new to a leadership role. Maybe you're new to a new company and you want to figure out how do you uncover what do you need to let go of so that you can become this newer version of yourself?
Right.
So, and my role, I really view as a coach, is to hold space and ask powerful questions to help people figure out what they already know to be true in a way where they can take action. A lot of times people confuse coaches and therapists, and I loved how it was described to me. So like, if this is your life trajectory and this is the intervention, like a coach works in this space, thinking about where do you want to head next? And a therapist works back here in terms of patterns or histories or traumas that were informing where you're at. Mm-hmm. So coaching can be therapeutic, but it's not therapy. And there is very much a place for therapy, especially in grief work. But I like to work with people who have grief experiences and are figuring out, okay, I have the therapeutic support, but where do I want to take this part of my story moving forward? So I don't know, my fingers are waggling. But in this magical space, you know, you are changed, you are altered as a result of this grief experience. And what do you need to let go of? And what do you want to hold on to? And how do you want to use this part of your life in new ways?
Right. I love that. I love that you help individuals do that, because there's a challenge, right? Because people don't necessarily know how to let go certain things. Mm-hmm. It becomes a safety net, you know, and I've talked about this several times. You know, people, the safety net of holding on to memories, to, you know, and these are not bad things. It doesn't necessarily mean to let go, right? You know, it means, hey, take those memories and remember the life that you had. And it's a lot easier said than done. I think I've been there so many times, and I used to get mad when people would go, "You have to move forward. You have to do this, that." I used to get mad about it. I don't get mad about it anymore, right? But I am very careful about the words that I use when it comes down to that, because I know what it felt like when I was first told that.
Yep.
You know what? I'm not moving forward. What do you mean? I'll punch you in your throat. You move forward, right? You don't know me like that. So, you know, it was a very personal thing when I heard those first words, and I didn't know how to transition. I believe I just followed what my body needed, right? What my intuition was telling me to do. And I just kind of went with the flow, because I figured I ain't got nothing else to lose.
Yeah.
I might as well go with the flow and see where it takes me, right? I think as people struggle with the intuition because of the hurt and the pain that comes along with grief and trauma, as they begin to transition through the different variations of stages.
Sure.
Grief. So I want to get your thoughts on it.
I'm curious, going back to this idea of intuition, because I think that a good coach will really help you tune into your intuition. Mm-hmm. So for someone who's grieving, who's maybe doubting their intuition, I just wrote a post about this today on LinkedIn, actually, about there was this quote that was given to me. I'm going to look it up because it's right here. Change happens at the speed of trust. And I thought that was really fascinating. But like, when you go through a disruptive life event, too much change is happening at once. Like, that's the definition of trauma, right? Too much, too fast. And so, at least in my experience, I feel like that was a real hit to my intuition. I had trouble trusting the universe because I was pissed. I had trouble trusting some of the people who I could rely upon because they weren't showing up in ways that I wanted to. I had trouble trusting my family structure because it had completely changed. Mm-hmm. So what would you say, Tony, like for those who are trying to tap into their intuition as a guide when things feel really shaky, or like you're in that place of lacking trust in yourself?
Well, I would give this statement: trust is earned, even with yourself. It is earned. Just like how we go out into the world, right? You may meet someone, you don't necessarily trust that person because you don't know what their intentions are towards you, right? Grief is exactly that. It's a stranger that shows up. You've already gone through the trauma. You've already gone through some very painful losses and things like that. Of course, there's a sense of trust, lack of trust, right? Yep. Because one, if you can go down to a dark place, well, you don't trust yourself what you're going to do next. Trust me, I know. Been in that dark place, almost took my life, right? I didn't trust myself being in that dark place no more because I knew what would happen. Trust is earned with yourself. Take the time and earn that trust. That's where your intuition kicks in. Trust your intuition to guide you where you can go to a place of safety within. But you have to understand the boundaries that you've put up.
Yep.
You have to understand your safety nets that you've developed to keep yourself safe. Right? Grief is just the opposite of that. It wants to give you safety, but you have to trust it to guide you to those areas, to be able to release and to be able to receive.
I love that invitation. I'm really intrigued about the idea of trusting my grief. Again, I don't think that's commonplace in our culture. I really believe grief is a teacher, and it has changed my life trajectory.
That's what you just said right there. Grief is a teacher, right?
Yeah.
So now let's go back to childhood. You trusted your teacher to teach you the things that you need to know in order to develop within life, to get the good grade in school, right? Well, grief is your teacher.
Can be a complicated one.
It's definitely complicated, right? But just like a child learning how to walk, you're going to fall and you're going to stumble a couple times. But it's a matter of getting back up and going, okay, I done fell a couple times. I'm going to try it again.
Mm-hmm.
And trusting yourself, trusting your grief, trusting your body, your own thoughts, to allow yourself to be able to move and grow.
Yeah, that's a real invitation.
Place of acknowledgement in a world and a reality that is now changed for you.
Right.
Right? So you're starting over. You just got to learn how to walk again. But it takes individuals like Katie and so many other people that have joined in on Instagram and Facebook. It takes us to be able to walk with those individuals with the understanding that this is a fragile place. You know what I'm saying? And trust is earned. Trust is earned, especially when you've been hurt.
Yeah, very much. And I want to go back to that word fragile, in pairing this idea, earlier we were talking about this metaphor of marble, and you were talking about how it's not designed, it's sturdy, it's strong, it's, but also very powerful, but to be shifted and changed. And so I think, at least in my experience, grief knocked me to my knees, and it definitely changed a lot of things. But in the standing up again, that fragility moved and transformed to strength. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes I freak people out because, like you said, like I love talking about it. I'm always poking or bringing it up. And there are plenty of people who don't want to go there. And so, but like, I think grief also reveals fragility in other people as you get more comfortable. So as I've gotten more equipped to talk about my grief and the way that it has transformed my life, I think there's an invitation for others too to say, actually, I'm doing okay today. Like I have my moments of weakness, but that idea that fragile is bad, like I really am against. I think it can be a very vulnerable place, but there's such an interesting, I'm doing this because I'm like trying to hold it.
Yeah. No.
You talked about the messy. I'm playing with the word fragile and strength in service of our grief and healing, because I think it's a both and.
Yeah, well, you can't have one without the other, right?
Yeah.
The fragility, the healing begins, right? It's the yin and the yang.
Yep.
Everything that we experience in life is connected to something else, right? You go through loss in order to find love. And what I mean by that, love is just unexpressed emotions. When we go through grief, we miss those individuals so much, right? We don't know how to express it. We don't know how to express it because the individual is not there. It's easier when you're standing in front of me and I can hug you and I can tell you how I feel about you. I can feel that, right? Grief is you don't feel that because the hurt is so, you're consumed by it.
Mm-hmm.
But once you begin to allow it to move and transition, you realize that love just transitioned into a different form. So then we can begin to express that love in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate life in some sense, right? We appreciate the people who show up, those who don't. We appreciate new friendships, jobs, these wonderful, beautiful first time experiences in this new life. And that's what I mean by that. It's just unexpressed.
Mm.
And that's where the fragility comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can meet someone and they can take advantage of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And you'll never want to open up again. But that's 1 out of 50.
Well, again, it goes back to that Brene Brown idea of who are you trusting with your story? And I do think it's wise to guard your heart as you are healing. And it's wise to use, again, that intuition to say who is equipped to listen and receive where I am at today. And that's part of the letting go too. Like sometimes you need to end relationships so that you can grow in different ways with different people, or you need to move and change and shift. So I'm very much in agreement.
And I'm going to add to that, right? Because, you know, we're doing a podcast and we got many people that are joining in on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, all these different places, right? We're trusting them with our stories.
Right.
Right. So we've now moved that bar to who are we trusting with our stories?
That's a really interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Right. So again, it's one thing, you know what I'm saying, to go, yeah, you got to beware of who you trust with those stories. We're in an age of technology. We have so many people that are just now joined in and enjoying this story that we're having. And we're trusting them with our stories, but also they're trusting us with their vulnerability. Like Miss Liz put the comments up here, right? There's, you know, other people that are joining in and things like that. It's a give. You trust me with yours. You trust me not to take what you just said and use it against you. Well, I'm trusting you not to take what I just said and use it against me. So again, I'm trusting my intuition openly through our vulnerability, through our grief journey, through these conversations, right? So when we think about it, there's many other doors that just opened up that maybe we didn't pay attention to. So, you know, and again, we go back in and we go, oh man, who am I trusting with my story today?
Yeah. And, you know, as you're thinking about the parts of your story that you choose to share or what I'm bringing forth in a public forum is very different than like what I might talk to my husband about, you know, at the end of the day. And so I very much agree with you. And I think my hope, especially in these powerful platforms as we connect with people all over the world, and why I've chosen to tell my story over and over again is the hope of like the Me Too moment. And I know the phrase Me Too got a little bit co-opted in service of a movement. And that's not as much what I'm talking about here, but especially in grief, when we don't have these spaces to tell our stories, we feel so alone. And I, losing my dad at a younger age, had so many moments of like, I am the only person in my friend group who has lost a parent. I am the only person at work who is going through grief. I am the only person in this environment. And so when we start to use these tools, whether it's social media or workshops or community collective spaces that you're so equipped at fostering, Tony, it's like we build these little networks that help us break down this lie that we are the only ones experiencing these feelings. Right. And I think so much of what is problematic about grief in our culture is it's couched in shame. And like people are uncomfortable, or I don't know, people have said to me, like, you're not over that yet. Like you're still talking about this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still talking about this. Like, and I know that's not everybody's choice and that's okay. But every time I get on one of these experiences, that's my hope, is that one person will say like, wow, I thought it was just me. And then that can ripple out
Right.
in service of connection.
And you touched on it, and that's a very powerful point. That when we share our journeys across these platforms, when I first started this, I told myself, I wanted to serve, and it just transitioned into something else. So when I started having these conversations, I saw the impact that these conversations was having on other people.
Yeah,
It dawned on me, these stories had become someone else's survival guide.
exactly.
Not alone, right? We may come across people who've been through similar things, and it goes back to an old quote: "You have to find your tribe." But what happens when you're a part of multiple tribes, right? I got parental loss, I got sibling loss, I got child loss, I've got loss by suicides, by homicides, overdoses, all of these different tribes that I've been a part of, and I am still a part of. And they've allowed me to be in that present moment with them, um, and to be a part of their tribe. So when I'm feeling the loss of my younger brother, I know I can go step over here and be around other people that have gone through something similar, right? So I don't feel so alone in the world no more. That's the reason why we do the things that we do, to be able to offer many different avenues for people to come and join in and be able to have other people, allow other people the the honor and the privilege of walking with them as to begin to figure it out. Not to not to not to guide them the way that we want to see them to go, but allow them the freedom to go in the direction that they need to go. Right? Because they're going to listen to what Katie said, they're going to listen to what I said, they're going to listen to what so many other people said, right? But it's how we show up.
Yeah, very much.
It's how we show up with those individuals. Are we gonna skip? Because I'll put up my arm if you want to skip. We can do, if we figure it out. But if we need to walk, that's fine. If we need to sit down, I'm totally fine with that too. Because I do come in with the notion of, this is yours. This is yours. Whatever you need. If you need to sit down and take a breather because life has been hitting you around so much, that's fine. Because I can't walk it. I can't walk the journey for you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't walk it with you.
Mm-hmm.
When you go in that storm, I can't go in the storm with you. But I can be waiting on those pivotal points when it pushes you out and everything. And then, what I'm saying? Going back in there. Come on, go back in there, right? I'll meet you on the other side, right? So I'll be there to give you water and even wipe your head while you're going through it. But I can't go through that storm with you because that's your individual storm. And it's designed to change you. It's what you do in that storm that determines how you come out the other side. And I'm just that guy. I just want to be there to make sure that you're okay as you're going through it.
Yeah, that's a real gift. People are lucky. And look at the culture and the community that you've created around that. You talk about your tribe. There's real power in being willing to create something. And when you think about leadership, you just need someone to say, I'm going to go first. And so I just thank you for doing that, because we all need places to hold these conversations, have these conversations in these individual moments of healing. And it doesn't happen on our own.
Yeah, it takes good people with good hearts to be able to walk with them. I know you got to take off and everything. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But I want to ask you, if you could leave the audience with something today, what would you leave them with?
Oh, there's the mic drop question.
I love it.
My number one grief advice that I encourage is find comfort, however that means to you. So much of the myths and the methods that we're told is to work through a program or work through 5 steps, or by the end of the first year, you should do X, Y, and Z. And all of that advice can be helpful if it's helpful. But for me, it's how can you find comfort as you continue to carry on? So whether that's through connection with someone else or a book or some sort of token, we need reminders that we're doing okay. And so comfort to you is like what? And then you go from there.
There we go. There we go. How can people find you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at 52 Beautiful Things, 52 Beautiful Things. My website is katiehuey.com. And my email is katie@katiehuey.com. And I'd love to have a conversation with you. Follow along. My personal blog, too, is 52beautifulthings.com. So if you're interested in that grief story that I was talking about, go back to the archives. The stories have shifted and changed there a little bit as I've had a child, so they're not as grief focused, but if you go back there, all the posts are there. So I'd love to connect.
I love it. I love it. Katie, thank you for coming on, having such an amazing conversation with me. And, I look forward to us, because you're in Northern Colorado too. So, there's opportunity there to do so much more.
Yes, stay tuned. The magic is just beginning.
Yes. And this, the weather is good now, right? So now we can get out there and do all kinds of stuff in the community. Look forward to that. For everyone else who's been tuning in, thank you guys for tuning in. Everybody on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble. Thank you guys for tuning in, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation. If you did and you haven't already, do me a favor. Head over to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, the next couple of days, I do not have a guest, but we have more guests that are coming. So this kind of disrupts the daily podcast. But if I can bring on somebody, I'm going to keep delivering to you guys. But if you do have a story that you would like to come on and share, reach out to me. I would love to have you on as a guest. And if you know anyone who could benefit from the conversations that we have, please do me a favor. Share this with them. This helps us get the stories out there to help normalize the conversation around death, dying, and grief and trauma. And it helps us reach so many more people. With that being said, I welcome, I thank you, my guest, Katie, for being on.
Thank you.
Everyone else. We will see you guys in the next episode. And do me a favor today. Go out and enjoy the weather, make memories, and make sure that you love the people that you know that you love them, because tomorrow's never guaranteed. And remember, on your grief journey, you're not by yourself. And this is going to conclude this episode. We'll see you guys in the next one.